950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and airing on WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk. Welcome to the Gaily Show, the only daily LGBTQ radio news and talk show in the United States. I am your host, John Parker. And no matter where you live, from Bangor, Maine to New Orleans to Billings to Monterey Bay, we've got you here at the Gaily Show. We're also streaming on our YouTube channel right now. If you like what we are doing, subscribe, click the like button, leave us a comment, tell us some stories that you would like us to cover here at the Gaily Show. I want to remind folks that the final film in the Queer Gaze, that's Gaze, film series for 2025 is this coming Sunday, December 14th at 2 p.m. They are screening the film Saving Face. And Saving Face is a 2004 rom-com about a Chinese-American surgeon who has been keeping her lesbian identity hidden from her widowed mother. But then she comes home one day to find her mother at her door, having been banished when it was discovered that she is pregnant out of wedlock. So both are reluctant to go public with their secret loves, but that clash rather against expectations. But will they be able to keep their secrets while they are living together? So that film is at Imagine Willow Creek Theater. You can go to imagine-entertainment-/queer-gaze or we have a link in our show notes and on our website that you can look for, or you can just go to flipthescriptfest.org and you'll find not only info about the film, but you can watch the trailer. And this, of course, is organized by the Flip the Script Film Festival organizers. Okay, I want to acknowledge there's a lot happening in the news today. Coming up after us, the best in progressive news and analysis, AM 950. We've got the Matt McNeil Show in Minneapolis. We've got more coming up on WCPT 820. For us today, it is our weekly Unpack This For Me episode, where we bring in a special guest for the hour to unpack a particular issue affecting the LGBTQ and allied community. And my guest today is a fan favorite of the Gaily Show, Jake Wittich. You know him as the managing editor of Windy City Times, where he reports in-depth stories of Chicago's LGBTQ community and oversees the publication's growing newsletter operation. The Chicago Journalists Association named him the Journalist of the Year for 2025, and we are very, very lucky that he joins us bi-weekly on Wednesdays to share his award-winning journalism. Jake, welcome back to a special episode of Jake Wittich for the Gaily Show.
Thank you. You have me the full hour now.
Full hour. Okay, I want to start with I really want to know how you go about doing the work that you do and how you came to the position that you're in. By way of getting started with that, you're an editor of a newspaper. When MAGA is in charge of the federal government and using its power to attack cities that are LGBTQ havens, such as Chicago, is that work that you're doing right now with Windy City Times different than it was under previous administrations?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say because I joined Windy City Times at the tail end of the Biden administration. And so I only got a taste for that. I've been doing LGBTQ news for about 10 years, just kind of tucking it into my other roles where I worked at other newsrooms covering other beats. But now that I'm doing it full time. So I'd say it is a little bit different. It feels a lot more urgent. I think one plus, though, is the community has been a lot more engaged. Our readership is up, our social media engagement is up. And I've seen across the board, even with the events we cover, attendance is up. So I just think people are looking to be plugged into their community right now because that's how we fight back. So Windy City Times has been a great connector amidst all of that.
I am so grateful to hear that the readership is up because, I mean, y'all are 40 years old right now, which is huge. For any type of newspaper, frankly, particularly for a queer newspaper. So it's very glad to know that readership is up for the year. I am curious about your approach then to reporting and editing a newspaper? Like, tell us about how you go about your reporting and what you're looking for when you're the editor.
Yeah, I would say my reporting is very rooted in community engagement.
Mhm.
I try and show up everywhere. And that's what I hear from everyone. They're like, wow, you're everywhere. And I try to be, but people say that, and there's still like a million places in my mind where I'm like, couldn't go there, couldn't go there. I'm too busy, So it starts with that, just meeting the community where they're at. I go to as many community events as I can, whether they're galas or, the other week I covered a World AIDS Day ceremony at the AIDS Garden of Chicago, which we talked about on here. So it starts with that, going to every event, but it's a lot of listening. I really let the community I'm covering dictate or have a strong voice in how the story is told. I think there's a tendency from more mainstream news outlets to kind of parachute into a community when there's a major story happening, and they extract their quotes and then they leave. And I even did that in some of my past roles. I would go to neighborhoods I would never be in, I would never visit unless there was a shooting there. And I just felt awful. I would get my quotes, tell my story, and leave. And there was no follow up, there was no connection with that community. So I'm doing the opposite now. I'm always in the community and I'm listening. I'm asking questions. What stories need to be told? I'm asking for feedback on my stories every time a story posts. I shouldn't say every time, but as many times as I can. I will email everyone involved in that story and invite them to give me feedback. It's always valuable. You get story follow-up ideas, everything with that. So community engagement is key.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was an assignment editor, and I was the person sending folks out to the shootings and the fires and all of that. And it's exhausting after a while because you're not making those community connections. And I remember working with very specific news directors and producers who wanted a very particular type of story, the hard news, to be in their program. What are you looking at when you decide to cover a story? What do you look
There's a variety of things. I love hard news. So even within my LGBTQ beat, I lean towards the hard news. I've encountered misunderstandings throughout my career where editors see LGBTQ plus stories that beat as just features and arts and entertainment. And I've had to push back in certain newsrooms, like, well, there's actual issues affecting our community too. And while our involvement in the arts is important, like there's stories that are not being told. So I do lean toward the hard news. I also am really passionate about diversifying coverage of the LGBTQ plus community. The stories we tell should reflect the diversity of our community. So at Windy City Times, we have two newsletters called En La Vida, which they both revived publications that ran in the 90s and then folded, but now they're back as these newsletters. And the first is En La Vida, which covers Chicago's Latino queer community. And then the second is Black Lines, which covers the Black queer community. And it's all about making sure that people of color have a voice in our LGBTQ plus storytelling. So I'm looking for that. I'm really passionate about telling trans stories as well. So you'll see a lot of that reporting from me, and just making sure every letter of our beautiful community is represented. So
we are talking with managing editor of Windy City Times, Jake Wittich. Can you tell me more about that? Because I feel like cis white gay men were sort of the pioneers of things. They always seem to have the ability and the privilege to start things, newspapers and radio shows, frankly, and all sorts of media. And that didn't necessarily translate into intersectionality within the coverage that they were doing. Talk to me now about, we're in 2025 and you're very specifically doing that, how you're approaching developing those intersectional lenses and how you're covering the community.
Yeah, it's really important for me to let the people I'm covering kind of lead this coverage. I am a cis white gay man, so I can't know exactly what it's like to be a trans person. I don't know what it's like to be a woman or a person of color, but as I'm stepping up into these leadership roles, I'm also making sure that I'm bringing journalists who are people of color, who are trans, who are marginalized up with me. So the Black Lines newsletter, although I do a lot of reporting for it, it's written and it's spearheaded by Anna Deshawn, who is a Black queer person on the south side of Chicago. She founded E3 Radio, which is a queer radio station here in Chicago. And then En La Vida is written by Luke Calzada, who is Latino and queer and non-binary. So it's really important to me that we're bringing in people from those communities to tell their stories. And in the cases where I am telling those stories, I'm really listening to get it right.
You're doing them as newsletters, e-newsletters rather, that are coming out. And I'm curious about how are you navigating that paper tactile experience versus the digital right now? Like, as a reporter, we're going on this, it feels like the digital is nonstop and how it's evolving all the time. You know what I mean? There's video and there's TikToks and there's social media platforms, and then there's the physical manifestation, like newspapers. Talk to me about how you're approaching technology in terms of the reporting that you're doing for the community.
Yeah, it's really crucial to engage technology in our approach. Windy City Times folded its print publication in 2020. So we're wrapping up our 5th year without print. So this having a strong online presence is key, because that's the only touch point we have. It is difficult. We're building this plane as we're flying it. So we're kind of piecing it together one bit at a time. Starting with our newsletter game, now I'm trying to expand our social media game more as we get more funding. But newsletters are key. You have direct communication with your audience. It's not as susceptible to the ever-changing algorithms. Yes, like Gmail can send you to the promotions tab or anything like that, but social media is always evolving. News articles aren't doing as well on Facebook anymore, for example. Yeah, so it's just a more direct way to communicate with your audience, and you get their contact info. So it's newsletters are important, I think.
I want to unpack that Facebook component, because there's another thing happening with social media. I mean, I guess Facebook has been very open about, hey, you can discriminate against queer people on our platform. But we're going to take a break. We're going to have more with managing editor of Windy City Times, Jake Wittich, when we come back. If you like what we're talking about here with Jake, we have literally created a playlist of him on our YouTube channel. So you can go and look up on our YouTube channel, Chicago LGBTQ News, Windy City Times, and that is literally every single appearance that Jake has made on The Gaily Show. Go to youtube.com/@The Gaily Show. We will be right back here on AM 950 KTNF and WCPT 820. Welcome back to The Gaily Show. I'm John Parker. We're coming up on the bottom of the hour. This is our weekly episode we call Unpack This For Me, where we sit down with an expert guest to take a deep dive into an issue or issues facing the LGBTQ and allied community. You know our guest, rather, from his bi-weekly appearances here on The Gaily Show, Jake Wittich, managing editor of Windy City Times. Jake, we were talking about using technology to get out the reporting about the LGBTQ community, provide that coverage. You had mentioned something about how Facebook news articles weren't trending there or doing as well on that platform. Can you tell us more about that? Because I was looking into some data and I found out that older LGBTQ adults of all of the social media platforms, Facebook has been the one that they use the most. But then I've been seeing some similar stuff that you've been seeing. So tell us more about, from your perspective, that platform and using it to get the word out.
Yeah, well, to start off, I want to agree. Facebook has been used the most with older audiences. Windy City Times has been around for 40 years. So we have a lot of older readers. And at my previous job at Block Club Chicago, which is, it's very new, it's like 5 or 6 years old, Facebook didn't do as well for me because I think they were reaching a younger audience. But Windy City Times has this long-term audience built in. So all of a sudden I started sharing articles on Facebook and my engagement went up. So I was like, oh, this is what I need to invest in here. So just interesting there, but it does come with some challenges. I've noticed that, and there's like research, and I think Facebook might have even, or Meta might have even said this in a Q&A or something, but if you post a link to an article, it's not going to perform as well. So it's better to like post it in the comments of a Facebook post or have an image and then link in the comments. And I've been tinkering with this on our Facebook page. So like, for example, um, the mayor's search for an LGBTQ plus news director is nearing its end. So we posted just the article. It got 11 likes. And then I posted a graphic with the link in the comments and it got 137 likes. So massive difference there, from 11 to more than 130. So just an interesting thing I found, but that just shows like the algorithms are always changing on Facebook. Google is always changing too. And as Google has those, chat GPT or AI summaries at the top of each Google search, they're aggregating from your news articles, but they're not people. I don't know if they're linking there, but if they are, it's less likely someone's going to click to follow that link. So even search is not as reliable as it used to be. So that's why I really think newsletters are key. And like I said earlier, you collect that contact info. So when Windy City Times threw its 40th anniversary party this year, we were able to invite everyone who reads our newsletters, and we're doing a fundraising drive right now. And we have everyone's contact info to reach them, to ask them to give us money. So I think there's a lot of benefits to becoming what we're calling it as newsletter first operation.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that. I mean, I'm not on Facebook. I will never go back to Facebook. Neither station will be able to get me to go back there.
I respect that.
I will go off the air before I go back onto that stupid platform. But it's interesting to me that, I mean, as a news organization, you want to drive people to the news, and they're saying, well, no, if you actually link to your actual journalism, we're going to suppress that versus pulling quotes or graphs from it to put into post. I am curious because we've just started getting into YouTube this fall, and we're trying to like sort it out, and like what's our strategy and figure that out. And it is a hotbed of anti-queer people on here. Like, we're just discovering that even just using LGBTQ, the people who use it the most are MAGA and the trolls.
Yeah.
So it's like we're not even actually reaching people that we want to be reaching with that keyword. And I'm curious for you, is there a particular platform that you find to be more engaging and less bots and haters, or are they is it all sort of just the same no matter where you're at?
Yeah, we've been really lucky at Windy City Times. At my previous jobs at the Sun Times or Block Club Chicago, anytime I wrote an LGBTQ plus story, the comments would just be disgusting, just filled with trolls, probably bots, But I don't know, Windy City Times is pretty insulated. It's rare that a story gets that kind of harassment or trolling. Usually it's like the stories that reach more national attention. So like the story I mentioned about our mayor hiring an LGBTQ news director. This has been a saga. There's been some controversy. It's an important position. So it's gotten a lot of attention. And then it gets a lot of people commenting like, why is this position needed? Or when one of our gay alder people was handcuffed by ICE during an immigration raid, that reached national attention. And it's a hot button issue. So it did get a lot of trolls. But that's a rare experience we have. And I don't know why, but I'm going to take it.
No, yeah, totally. I'll be curious. Mayor-elect Mamdani in New York has announced that he's going to do something similar in creating a position. So I'm going to be curious to see what his process is in hiring, a leader for the LGBTQ community versus how Mayor Johnson approached it.
Yeah, I'm curious. Will it take a year and a half?
Well, but I mean, that's why some people would be like, well, it's Chicago. I don't live in Chicago. Why should I pay attention? It's like, well, you should be paying attention because how each of these cities are doing things impacts how other cities are going about doing things as well. And clearly you are an award-winning journalist. So we all should be tuning in and reading the work that you're doing. And I know I'm biased about that, but it's true. It is a fact. I'm here with speaking of which, the 2025 Chicago Journalist of the Year, awarded by the Chicago Journalists Association. I know we've briefly talked about that on air. Tell me more about the experience of your peers saying you are the Journalist of the Year for 2025.
Yeah, it's wild. I found out about a month before the ceremony, and at first I just didn't believe it. I didn't think I really deserved it. I was like, I'm not like a capital I investigative journalist. I do occasionally do like a light investigation, I guess, and I'm not like breaking national stories. I'm rarely at City Hall. So I was just like, why me? But then the more I thought about it, and I made a list of everything I did in the past year. And I was like, okay, like the common thread to this is community. I'm a community embedded journalist. And the term I've been using is community journalist. And that really sums up what I do. I tell stories with the community, for the community, and embedded into it. So I don't know. It's been wild. By the time I got to the awards, I was like, yes, I do deserve this. And it was just such an honor. Yeah. Yeah. And it's given me a new, I was feeling confident before. It took me a while to get here, but it's leveled me up even more. And like, there's times where I want to ask a tough question or reach out to a really important source and I'll second guess myself. But now I'm like, no, you're Chicago Journalist of the Year. Ask,
For sure. For sure. Queer humility is out. Let's cancel queer humility. It's done. It was so early aughts. All right. We're going to take a break here. If you like what you're seeing, click subscribe on YouTube. Give us a like. Out comment the trolls, as it were. And none of this would be possible without listener support. When we come back from this break, I'm going to tell you, for listeners who are in Minnesota, how you can support AM 950 Radio and why you should be doing that. You're listening to The Gaily Show. More after this quick break. Studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and airing on WCPTA 20, Chicago's progressive talk where facts matter. Welcome back to the Gaily Show. It is 33 minutes after the hour. For our listeners and viewers in Minnesota, none of this is possible without listener support. And when I say to you that now that they've come for public radio, they're coming for independent radio next, it's for real. So I need you in the next commercial break, not right now, in the next commercial break, to go to am950radio.com and click on Become a Member. Right away, we're going to send you a 2026 calendar with photography, original primo photography by our very own Matt McNeil from the Matt McNeil Show. And then there will be other things that you will get as part of your membership to keep independent progressive radio on the air, which includes Stephanie Miller Show, Tom Hartman, the Matt McNeil Show, Native Roots Radio, the only Indigenous Native American radio program in the country, right here on AM 950, Ghost Box Radio, and yes, of course, the Gaily Show. So you can go to am950radio.com, click on Become a Member, support us, keep us on the air. All right. It is our weekly Unpack This For Me episode where we bring in an expert guest to unpack a particular issue or issues affecting the LGBTQ and allied community. Today, we're talking about media, specifically journalism. You know him as the managing editor of Windy City Times, where he reports in-depth stories on Chicago's LGBTQ plus community and oversees the publication's growing newsletter operation. The Chicago Journalists Association named him Journalist of the Year in 2025, and we are very lucky that he joins us bi-weekly on Wednesdays to share his award-winning reporting. He is Jake Wittich. Jake, you are also involved in a community journalism project. Tell us about that, because that's also very key to what we need in terms of growing representation within the journalism field.
Yeah, it's taken me 10 years to get to this point in my career, and I hope that I can make it easier for other people to get to this point and be able to tell stories about their own communities. So the stars really aligned for Windy City Times to partner up with E3 Radio, which was founded by Anna Deshawn, who writes our Black Lines newsletter. I mentioned her earlier. But we are partnering. We got a grant from Press Forward Chicago, and we got a grant to teach a 6-week community journalism program. So it's going to start. It's a small cohort of 6 students, but it's going to start with basically learning the basics of community journalism, what it is, how to conduct interviews that aren't extractive, and just kind of the ethics of being a journalist embedded into a community. And then they're going to pitch their own stories, work on them over the course of the 6 weeks. We bring in guest lecturers from across the industry, and then maybe a field trip to a newsroom. We'll see. And then it culminates with their piece being published on windycitytimes.com. So it's a really awesome program. We did the first cohort this year, beginning of 2025, and now going into 2026, this is the second year. So we've learned a lot. We're refining the process, and I'm really excited about what's to come.
That's fantastic. If people want to sign up for that, can they do that now, or do they have to wait for the next cohort?
No, they can apply now. Go to tinyurl.com/OSOP26. OSOP26. That stands for Our Stories, Our Power 2026. So applications close 5 p.m. Friday, January 2nd. So you've still got plenty of time to apply. That link I gave you will have my contact info if you have any questions.
Perfect. I will make sure to include that in our show notes and in our website as well for folks. That brings me to a question that I'm curious about, because you deal with journalistic objectivity on a daily basis, the concept of that. Now you're going to be teaching folks on how to become community journalists. And I'm perpetually interested in this question lately because journalists, right, the whole objectivity idea, get multiple sides of the story before it goes to publication. Nowadays, though, one of those sides is fake news, conspiracy theories, disinformation. How are you approaching that? How should journalists be approaching that idea, that ideal, that standard of objectivity when you have sources that are so very clearly lying?
Yeah, or just hateful, like and actively harming a community with their words. It's hard, Objectivity matters in journalism, but it is to an extent, I guess. Like if someone's being racist, homophobic, transphobic, are you really going to platform those ideas, And I think there's this idea that idea of both sidesism, and it should apply to everything in journalism, but that's not true, For example, when marriage equality was being legalized, it still wasn't legal. One of my colleagues, Sean Lewis, he tells this story. He was the first out gay anchor at WGN, and he was sent in Chicago, but he's at WGN. He was sent to cover the marriage equality debate, and his editor had told him, like, well, you need to get somebody who's opposed to it too. And then he pulled the edit. He very politely just said, like, hey, can I talk to you in private? And took the editor in another room, and he just kind of gently told them, imagine it's 1950 and we're talking about racial segregation, and you're asking me to get the other side here, and it really put things into perspective for that editor. So when I heard him tell that story, we were on a panel together last month. It really stuck with me. And I think that's a good example. Both sidesism doesn't always apply. Look at the debate over gender affirming care. Publications like the New York Times have approached it with this both sidesism idea, and in doing so, they've platformed some harmful rhetoric, some or just faulty science, and just it's harming the transgender movement. And then the Supreme Court cites those articles and its rulings, and it just really shows how this harmful kind of reporting can have real world consequences.
That is the perfect example of it, where you have a publication considered a marquee publication, the New York Times, that's sitting there well, we have to get the other side of the story, but the other side of the story is junk science.
Yeah.
But then you have Supreme Court justices go, hey, look, this was in the New York Times, so it must have some level of validity. And
it's frustrating, and in that case, I know a ton of queer and trans journalists have come together and even had meetings with leadership at the New York Times, and still no improvement. I just think if a community is telling you you're getting this wrong, you should listen to the community and evolve your coverage.
And that's the thing, is that there's that old standard of in journalism where it's like, if you're not pissing people off, then you're not doing your job correctly, right? Like everybody should be like, that's the objectivity part of it. And it's like, no, like you're saying, they both sides of them. That this shouldn't be a question of junk science easily disprovable versus, high quality longitudinal peer reviewed studies.
And what is objectivity? Is it true objectivity, or is it this is the white straight male perspective? I don't know.
Ding, 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 ding. My guest today is Jake Wittich, managing editor of Windy City Times. Jake, I am curious. When I've talked to journalists, they always seem to have a story that they can't wait to report on, but haven't had a chance to, or they've reported on it and they can't wait to keep covering it. What is that story for you?
This is really hard because there's so much happening. Like, I wish I could cover so much more. I feel like half the time I'm running around with like a chicken with its head cut off, like just chasing fire after fire. I wish I could do more like investigative reporting, I guess. I don't really know what to do there. I don't have a lot of experience there. I have people I could ask, and I could learn. But more of that, I guess, like the super, super hard hitting pieces that take months. It's hard to say. And then, with data, not a lot of data centers LGBTQ plus people, which creates hurdles, but I just read a great article that I'm actually going to read or have my cohort read about how you can get around that lack of data and still do a strong investigative piece. So I don't know. It's really hard. There's so much I wish I could cover.
Unpack that for us, because I think that a little bit more, as much as you can right now, that idea of data, because when we finally do get data from the community, people just start to try to poke holes in it immediately to discount it, as opposed to recognizing it for what it is. I mean, it's literal numbers. You can't argue with numbers. So talk to us about having data, but then navigating that opportunity where you don't have data because people are investing in it.
Yeah, well, right now I'm working on a story looking at the life expectancy gap in Chicago. It's about 20 years between the neighborhood with the highest life expectancy and the neighborhood with the lowest life expectancy. Yeah, and I'm trying to kind of look at where do LGBTQ plus people fall within this, But what's difficult is the life expectancy data is not, yes, it's broken into race and other, categories, but not LGBTQ plus identity. So I think the way I'm doing it is I'm presenting this data like, okay, Washington Park has one of the lowest life expectancies in Chicago. And then I'm interviewing experts about why that is. So the issues like lack of housing, lack of employment, lack of nearby healthcare institutions. And then I'm going to LGBTQ orgs and saying, how are these issues compounded for LGBTQ people? So I can say, although there's no data to show this, it could be even lower for a trans person living in Washington Park. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's such an interesting way of going about doing that. I don't know why this popped in my head, but if you, I'd be very curious if you do get the resources and time to do an investigative reporting of why all the major hospitals in Chicago have stopped offering gender affirming care, when you see other cities. And one of our representatives, state representatives here in Minnesota, Lee Finke, who was the first trans woman to be elected to the Minnesota legislature, she is claiming on the Gaily Show that no provider in Minnesota has stopped providing gender affirming care. And it's like, well, how did Minneapolis, St. Paul get away with that? And then in Chicago, that's not the case. This is a long segue into, is there a story that you've reported on this year that just you're like, wow, this is shocking. I wasn't expecting that I would have to cover this year.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't shocking. I saw it coming, but it is the rollbacks of gender affirming care for trans people. It's just heartbreaking, especially that they're targeting youth, like these kids have it hard enough. Just let them live their authentic lives. It's like, it's so hard to imagine a future as a young queer person as is, and then to not be affirmed in your identity. just makes that even harder to envision your own future. So that's been heartbreaking. And that is, I was trying to think of how to phrase this earlier. So thank you. When you asked like stories I wish I could cover more, this is the story. Like, there's so many more places I could take it. Look into why these hospitals, like you said, are canceling the gender affirming care for youth, but then also getting into the mental health toll this is taking on kids across the state. I've heard, you know, I want to be careful because it's not like I've gone to a coroner and like verified this, but I've heard that there have been children who have taken their lives this year, which is just so heartbreaking. So that's something I'd like to look into. Is that happening in Illinois? Or, you know, the people who flee to Illinois because we're supposed to be a sanctuary state for trans people, and then they lost their health care. Like, there's just so many more angles I could take this story, and with more time and resources, I would. And we'll get there.
Yeah. I have to fit in one last break. We're going to have more with managing editor of Windy City Times, Jake Wittich. Before we take that break, do check out our GLAAD Media Award nominated podcast, This Queer Book Saved My Life. I interview LGBTQ guests from across the rainbow about the queer books that had a life-saving impact for them. And then we bring in the book's author as they are available to talk about what did it take to write that book and get it into the world, and what was the impact of writing it on them. So you can check out This Queer Book Saved My Life everywhere that you get your podcasts, or at thisqueerbook.com. We can learn more about our GLAAD Media Award nomination from 2024. We are going to take one last break. More with the Gaily Show when we come back. Parker. We are coming up on the top of the hour. It is our weekly Unpack This For Me episode, where we have an expert guest join us for the hour to talk about an issue or issues facing the LGBTQ and allied community. My guest this hour is Jake Wittich, managing editor of Windy City Times. Jake, before the break, we were talking about the story Gender Affirming Care and how you're covering it and how maybe you'd hope to continue covering it into the future. This kind of gets back to, there's this, so we have the idea in the journalism field, and you're a journalist. I'm just some, person who sits behind a microphone and likes to talk to journalists. But that's us, right? You all. In healthcare, there's the Hippocratic Oath, which is do no harm. And I'm curious if you've had any conversations with healthcare providers in your reporting around how they're justifying the ethics of this, where they're saying, yeah, we know there's peer-reviewed longitudinal studies that this care is needed and it is safe, but I'm not going to offer it to them because I'm more concerned about funding for myself and my institution.
Yeah, the statements we've gotten from hospitals have all been pretty vague. So it's really hard to say like their reasoning, how they're justifying this. They're even talking to doctors has been hard for me. It's probably time for me to do another round of outreach. We have like one very prominent doctor in the gender affirming care space for youth in Chicago. And I've reached out to him a few times and he's never, he'll get back and just decline to talk at the moment. It's too sensitive of a topic. Don't want things like that. But I have seen him talk to other outlets. So I think it's a matter of me just building more trust. I've actually never met him face to face. So finding him at an event would be really helpful. So I could just walk up, introduce myself. He could get a feel for me. I could get, build some trust that way. But I do think, there's a lot of work I still need to do. And I would like to do it.
That's interesting how you framed that, because I immediately find that sus, like, oh, he doesn't want to come and talk to the queer folks because can't own up to the decision. But that's just me being.
No, I do get it. The reporter he has talked to, she is at the Tribune, and she's just done amazing coverage of this awful situation that trans youth are in Illinois. So she's been way more on it than even I have been. So I do understand why he would talk to her.
That's good. That's good. And this just exemplifies, as you're saying that, why you were named Chicago Journalist of the Year, because of how you do approach going around and building those relationships. I want to, as we're coming to the end of our time together, like Ken Schneck does on This News Is So Gay, I kind of want to, what is a story that has brought you some queer joy that you've covered in 2025?
Yes. I just interviewed Eric Piepenberg. He is a New York Times columnist, and he has roots in Chicago, and he has a new book out. So this might even help your podcast. I don't know. It's called Dining Out, and it traces basically a history of queer restaurants going back a century. And it was inspired by the Melrose Diner here in Chicago. It was a very famous, I guess, diner in the Boys Town area. It had been around for about 50 years, and it closed several years ago now. Time flies, wow. So he wrote a New York Times column about what that diner meant. And then he's like, there's more stories like this about the intersections of queer identity and restaurants. So he traveled the country, wrote this book, and it was just a really fun interview. It's at windycitytimes.com. And it had me thinking of like, what were my queer restaurants? What was my Melrose Diner? So I was thinking about like, we'd stumble out of the famous Berlin nightclub, which sadly closed a few years ago, at like 4 a.m. when it closed, or 5 a.m, and just before sunrise, wander over to Clark's Diner. And, it's just cool. And he was talking about how diners are interesting because the clientele changes throughout the day. Like the Melrose at 11 a.m. would be straight Cubs fans, but then after midnight, it's all people coming from the gay bars. So it was an interesting conversation. It had me feeling nostalgic. It got a lot of responses from readers shouting out their spots like that too. So that was a fun one.
That sounds really fun. There used to be, they just wrapped up this year. There was a podcast, Lost Spaces, that was literally about bars and clubs who have shut down, but they would interview Kay Anderson, who we just had here on the Gaily Show, would interview a person who used to go there and frequent it and talk about and basically get how they changed as an individual, as a queer person, based off of how they were, the environment that was there. And
that's really cool.
I love recapturing that history, because so much of it is fleeting and oral history, and and sometimes we need to write it down, otherwise we won't know that these places even existed. And knowing that we were there, sometimes it's just, particularly in the times that we are in, so important.
Yeah.
This is a huge, I'm really bad at this, asking a huge question before
I'll be quick.
Before we end our show. For folks who are considering applying or thinking about getting into journalism at all, what would your advice be to them right now?
Plug into your local news community. Read bylines. When you read a story, read the byline. You'll start to remember who was writing what kinds of stories. In Chicago, we have 1 million affinity groups. I'm the Chicago chapter president of the LGBTQ plus Journalists Association. I've made so many great connections there. I'm aware of so many opportunities in the industry through that, the Asian American Journalists Association, Black Journalists Association, so many. So plug into your community, no matter what level of experience you have.
Jake Wittich, managing editor of Windy City Times. You can read all of his award-winning reporting at windycitytimes.com. He is also on Blue Sky. Just search for Jake Wittich. That's Wittich on Blue Sky. And you
Wittich.
Oh, for the love of God.
It's okay.
I know I have that right here. I'm reading too fast. Jake, Wittich on Blue Sky. And we have all of his appearances collected from the Gaily Show into a single playlist on our YouTube channel. So you can get all of his award-winning reporting there. Thank you, Jake. We're going to see you back here next Wednesday.
All right. Thank you.
All right, folks, thank you for listening today. If you're watching, please click subscribe, click that like button. Let us know how you enjoyed this episode. And until this time tomorrow, keep it queer, America.